enough time on this. Let's move on to the next couple of questions. We're going to combine into one segment. Essentially, we're going to talking about how would you grade Bill Belichick's free agency move so far? And obviously, I assume we're all going to give him a low grade. So the next part of that second question is going to be, what do you need to see from the Patriots to make you feel better about this whole team moving forward, including the free agents and the draft picks and everybody else? So, Burge, I'll give you the floor first, and we'll roll from there.
So they obviously signed a lot of players in free agency this year. They spent a lot of money, to bring in guys like Matthew Judon, Nelson Aguilar, Kendrick Bourne, Jalen Mills. They signed all these guys. For me, the grade I'd probably give them at this point, C- is probably the high end of what I would give them. Matthew Judon seems to be a big hit in free agency. I mean, he's been, especially on the defensive side of the ball, a guy that we've talked about as, ups in most of their games so far this year. I mean, he's got pressure. He seems like he's an animal out there. And to be honest, we can chastise him for what happened on that Kamara touchdown and all this and that. But at the end of the day, I think he's going to be a big fit for this defense. And on the other side of that spectrum, somebody like Jalen Mills has been an absolute train wreck in my eyes, and I don't know if whether or not they signed him with the understanding that he was not going to be a number 2 corner, whereas they were going to have Stephon Gilmore healthy and ready to play. Whether it was a contract dispute or whatever. So I think maybe Jalen Mills improves once Gilmore gets back on the field here. But at this point in the season, I am 100% out on him. I know I was okay with the signing at the time, but I have since flipped on that. And Puma, you're 100% right in terms of what he is. He gives up the big play in two of their in their 2 losses this year. Let's be honest, they had the Dolphins and the Saints in third down. And on third down and late in the fourth quarter, who do they target? Jalen Mills. He gives up a big play, first down, game over at that point. So I'm not very unhappy with his performance, and I think we will all agree that the tight ends have been a massive disappointment so far through 3 games. I think Jonnu Smith will improve on his performance last week. I don't think it gets any worse. I think they just get better. But we're talking through training camp about how we're hearing all these things about how Jonnu Smith's going to be this secret weapon for this offense, and they're going to line him up in the backfield, and they're going to hand him the ball. And I think we've maybe seen one reverse to Jonnu Smith through 3 weeks, and that's not a recipe for success. Hunter Henry has been a massive disappointment. Yes, he's caught a bunch of balls, but sprinting into a false start on 4th and 1 when your team needs to get a first down, that shit can't happen at the end of the day. And a veteran player like that shouldn't be making that kind of mistake. The receivers, I think we talked over the summer about them, how we were, meh on the signings. I mean, I'm a big Kendrick Bourne guy. I really think that he's going to evolve into an effective part of this offense. But I think we can all agree that they didn't do enough at the wide receiver position to address their absolute need, for targets there, signing Aguilar and just Bourne at that point. So, C- is probably the highest I go, and I think it's skewed a little higher because of what I've seen out of Matthew Judon.
Go ahead, Puma.
I'm going to go D. I'm going to go with the D for this free agency grade. And the big reason why is, Jay, we were talking about this early on. And, Burge, you were kind of saying it's like an unfair expectation. But the fact of the matter is you spent almost $150, $200 million in guaranteed contracts for all these free agents to come over to New England. And everyone, for the most part, the majority of mainstream folks, and we're saying that these guys should, not even that, all across, ESPN, Fox Sports 1, Fox Sports, CBS Sports, CBS Sports HQ, you name the company that has a sports team, they were all on the same page. That on paper, even whether it's Cam Newton or Mac Jones, which came after the fact of free agency because the draft was in April, this should be a 10-win team. This should be a 10-win team. They could be knocking on the door of a second wild card. Like, there were playoff aspirations for this team, and it's just the only thing that's hit has been Matt Judon. And I'm saying that after he left Kyle Van Noy high and dry. But, I mean, he was flying all over the place in preseason. It looked like he got it. There were semblances of, me obviously not being a Pats fan, but, like, I was seeing semblances of maybe Rodney Harrison in that locker room, like that kind of alpha dog. And he's just been the only hit in my eyes. So with this division, the Dolphins, in theory, they could make noise. The Buffalo Bills are still the class of that division. The AFC as a whole, the Bengals are, exceeding expectations. The Browns look like a playoff-bound team. Who knows? Like, can the Cincinnati Bengals maybe get the last wild card spot that everyone thought New England might be able to squeak out in the AFC? So I'm going to go with the D on this free agency class.
Yeah, and Puma, I'm right there with you. I originally thought it was going to be an F, but because of the play of Judon, obviously that elevates it up to a D. And Judon has been great. I'll get that out of the way first. He's been energetic. Every time he's been out there, he flashes. It's easy for him to flash because he has those red, long sleeves he wears underneath his pads. Mm-hmm. So he's been doing great. He's been getting in the backfield. He gives me that vibe. Like, if he was on that, 2017 team, he would be like the Rodney Harrison of that defense. Just an alpha dog and a guy that can really get off the quarterback. Now, other than that, man, I have been so disappointed in the rest of the guys. Like, the wide receivers, they're not getting separation downfield. I know Bourne had a little bit of a success on Sunday, but that really came after the New Orleans Saints were up by 28, 14 points or whatever it was. And essentially at that point, they were playing a conservative cover 2 shell, and there's a bunch of, dink and dunks is happening for Bourne. So, he flashed a little bit, but for the most part, it's been disappointment. The tight ends have been absolutely atrocious. Like, Jonnu Smith, I don't know what the hell he was doing. He was out there for 30 plays, and 10 of them were bad plays. 1/3 of the plays he was out there were just absolutely horrific. Combined right now, Jonnu Smith and Hunter Henry have 20 catches, 183 yards, and no touchdowns. And just for some salt in the wound, right now through 3 games, Rob Gronkowski has 16 catches, 184 yards, and 4 touchdowns, right? So you're seeing, and obviously Brady and Mac Jones are completely different quarterbacks, but you're seeing just the amount of money they're spending, which is $30 million on 2 tight ends, compared to $8 million for Rob Gronkowski. It's jarring. On the defensive side, Godshot, Jalen Mills, you guys all hit it on the head, and I'm not going to belabor that point, but what you're seeing right now is something I've been driving at for years, and this is the lack that Bill Belichick has in his tool to essentially evaluate players and build rosters, right? I know a lot of times we like to differentiate the coach on the field with the GM, with the coffee drinker, with the TV show go watch, or whatever we want to say and do to make it feel better. But Bill Belichick has ultimately failed at putting this team together through free agency in the offseason. And I know it's only 3 games, and we'll revisit this down the line, but this has been going on for years, and now you're seeing it even worse because now we're spending a bunch of money to try to fix a mistake that couldn't be corrected through the draft process. So, ultimately, I don't know how it's going to pan out for the rest of the year. I don't know if they're going to get better or not, but things got to change around quick, and they got to start changing around quick on Sunday. Did
Bill Belichick not reload the New England Patriots I think it was 3 times over the course of 20 years? If you're gonna sit there and bash his complete roster building skills, you could bash his drafting for the last 5 years. I'm with you on that, 100%. But let's not just say it's a shortcoming that he cannot build a roster at this point. He drafted Rob Gronkowski, he drafted Aaron Hernandez. Yeah, I know it's a touchy subject, but he drafted those 2 tight ends, and they were absolute beasts on the field. He came in, he had obviously the Willie McGinnis, he had the Teddy Bruschi's, he inherited those guys from Pete Carroll and Bill Parcells when he came in, but he ended up turning it around. He goes out, he gets Randy Moss, Wes Welker for that offense. Let's not minimize what Bill Belichick has done over the last 20 years when it comes to building a roster. He's turned it over 3 times, and this is essentially his 4th go at it to return over the roster. And we can nitpick and do all that with his drafting over the last 5 years, etc. Like, I'm with you on the draft aspect of it. He's missed on a lot of picks, but let's not minimize the fact of his ability to build a roster. What do you got to say about that, Jay?
I mean, listen. I'm just gonna ask. Like, at what point can we start pointing some blame at him for what's happening? Like, last year I was told it's a reset year. Fine, okay, we're 7-9 last year. We took a bunch of money off the books, and now he's gonna bring in his new players to essentially turn his team around. And so far, I mean, it's obviously 3 weeks in, and we keep throwing the caveat out there. I see absolutely nothing that gives me confidence that this man can take this team without Brady on it and turn it into a winner. Because obviously all those pieces, Gronkowski, Hernandez on the offense, even some of the defensive players that he's drafted, eventually they get elevated by the play of Tom Brady. So can he do that now without Tom Brady on his roster? And so far, the records say that he can't. He was 7-9 last year. He's 1-2 this year. And it's looking like it's going the opposite. Instead of going up, it's going down. And that's all I'm asking. I'm just asking to show some light. I'm not asking these guys to turn to Gronkowski and Hernandez. Like, I'm not asking for that. I'm asking them to catch the fucking ball. Hold on to the goddamn ball. That's all I'm asking. And I don't think I'm unfair for asking that out of Belichick, but it seems like you think I am.
I don't think you're unfair. The question is a fair question to ask, but let's just not minimize what he's done over the last 20 years. And I may be getting ahead of ourselves with this conversation of the Bill versus Brady thing. I might be getting a little bit ahead of myself on this, but we're 3 weeks in. They have a multitude of new players on the roster. We all know, and we're all intelligent football people when we talk about this. Where it takes time for teams to gel together. You're not going to just bring in free agents and have it all work together. And again, that you can make the argument that comes back to his lack of ability to draft over the last 3, 4, 5 years. And I'm not going to argue that, but we got to afford some time for this team to gel together. And yes, they had Tom Brady through all of those. We'll call it reloads. At this point, this is not a reload. This is a rebuild. All right, this is Belichick's. We'll call it his fourth opportunity to try to retool, rebuild, reload the roster. In his tenure as a head coach. Yes, he's 69 years old, and I'm not making that excuse that because of his age that he can't do it. But you have to afford more time than 3 weeks to effectively evaluate what is going on with that.
I think, as someone that could speak on what a rebuild looks like, because I've had the front seat to that for a long time. The Dolphins tried that too with spending in free agency, getting the Ndamukong Suh, getting insert name here to play opposite Cam Wake, get some people on the offensive side of the football, and it never worked out until Brian Flores and Chris Greer, we can all agree, ripped it down to the studs. 3 years ago when they traded Laramie Tunsil. Jay, we were recording in the attic at the time, and you had to talk me off a ledge when that news broke. But looking back, Laramie Tunsil is the gift that keeps on giving. They didn't spend like drunken sailors in the offseason. They didn't spend like drunken sailors in free agency. They just rebuilt through the draft. They got the draft capital, whatever. Let's be honest. I would like to think we can all agree Bill did what what people would mock the New York Jets and the Miami Dolphins in the early 2000s of doing, of we're just going to throw a bunch of money at it and try to put a Band-Aid on a gunshot wound. And it, again, with the caveat, it's only 3 weeks, but it clearly has not worked.
Yeah, well, you could say that too. And, again, it comes down to stuff that we've all talked about for what? Over a year now since I've been on with you guys, is are the Patriots taking influence away from Bill Belichick for building his team? Or is Robert Kraft the reason they drafted Mac Jones? Is Robert Kraft the reason that they said, go out and fix this team, spend the money in free agency? That's where I get defensive on the whole Bill Belichick thing, aspect of this whole entire thing. It's all right, This is something that Belichick has not done for 20 years. Let's be honest. He never gone out and spent this much money on so many players in free agency. Occasionally, you get the one player like an Adelius Thomas, like a Stephon Gilmore, where they actually pay the guy, what his quote unquote market worth is to bring him in, and it's proven that this method has not worked in the past. And yes, there's a stat out there. I think it's like all these free agent signings. If you spend so much money, you net so many wins out of it. Yes, there's that aspect to it, but at the same time, it is completely different from the way that the Patriots and Bill Belichick and Robert Kraft have gone about building their team for the last 2 decades. And you can call it a panic move if you want. Like, there's arguments to be made about that they panicked because Brady won the Super Bowl last year. They go out, they spend like drunken sailors, to quote you, Puma, on this, and I just think that you need to afford some time for this team to gel, given the complexity of what the Patriots tried to do on both sides of the ball.